Kia ora and welcome to another episode of Top Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to talk about my top 5 tips on travelling Samoa. Samoa is a beautiful country with amazing people. I was recently there for 2 weeks with my partner and we loved every moment of it. Today though, I'm not going to talk about what the must-sees and must-dos are in Samoa. I'm going to give you my top tips on how to get the most out of a trip there. Usually how these top tip videos work is that you start at number 5 and you work your way down to number 1. But I'm going to start with my top tip today because I think really is the most important. So if there's one thing I want you guys to get from this video is this number 1 tip. So without further ado, my top tip for travelling Samoa is that you must hire a car. Samoa has public transport, especially on the main island of Upolu, but these buses run on what I like to call island time. And island time is just a relaxed attitude towards things. So these buses don't necessarily run on a timetable and don't necessarily stick to the same route. So to avoid any inconvenience or any issues when you're travelling Samoa, hire a car and you don't have to rely on public transport. Catching a bus in Samoa can be a real eye-opening experience. I saw on multiple occasions buses being quite full and therefore not a lot of seats, if any seats. What I saw happen next blew my mind. People still got on the bus, but instead of standing like you do most places, they sat on other people's laps. And that's a common occurrence in Samoa. So if there's no seats on the bus, you're not actually allowed to stand, you end up sitting on someone's lap, which could be quite entertaining, but for some that might be a little bit too close for comfort. So to avoid that happening, hire a car. My second tip today is referring to the car ferry that runs from Upolu Island to Savaii Island. We had quite a unique experience catching the ferry across for 2 reasons. The first one, the locals said that the ferry sort of runs on a first in first served basis. So if you're there early, you get on the ferry, especially if you have a car, because they have limited berths for a car. So we were told to get there nice and early to avoid any sort of issues around missing the ferry and having to wait for a later one. So we went there really early. We had to catch an 8 AM ferry and we were there at about 6. This, however, was too early, and I'm not sure if the locals were having us on or were actually serious. But anyhow, you do have to get there early if you want a spot. That's if you have a car. If you are a passenger and you're heading across to Savaii, I wouldn't emphasise getting there so early because it seems like they just cram as many people on anyway. We had a very unique experience of being parked in the undercarriage of the car ferry waiting to go, and a whole lot of people just sort of massing around the car as we approached Savaii Island ready to get off. They really have no rhyme or reason on how many people they have on board. It's just whoever there and first in first served. So my second top tip is make sure you book the ferry in advance and you get there nice and early. That'll avoid any issues that you might have on arrival, especially if you have a car. My next 2 tips are around food and restaurants in Samoa. When you're on both islands, Upolu or Savaii, breakfast is hard to come by in terms of cafes and restaurants. It's not something that we found easily accessible. Yes, there is a few places, especially in Apia, the capital, but the further you go out away from the capital, there's less and less places that you can order breakfast. So for that reason, when you're booking accommodation, make sure you find resorts or hotels that serve breakfast in the morning. That'll ensure that you're not going to miss out on a traditional breakfast: eggs, toast, bacon, cereal, that sort of thing. So that would be my third tip. Book accommodation that has breakfast covered. Number 4, also covering food, is the lack of restaurants and cafes on the island of Savaii. We didn't find this to be an issue so much on Upolu Island, but on Savaii, as we did our travels around, we noticed that we could travel quite a long distance, we're talking a few hours, before you come across another place that serves food. And for that reason, if you're traveling around, make sure you plan in advance. Do a bit of research on where the restaurants are so that you're not missing out. There's some really nice restaurants on the island of Savaii, but they're few and far between, and the only thing in between are local villages that sell chips and cola and that sort of thing, and they're not the best things to eat all day long. There are some villages that serve island style barbecue, which is fantastic, and I would recommend getting them, but you can't bank on these villages doing that because they're just not open. So to avoid any issues around food, make sure you plan your trip in advance while on the island of Savaii so that you don't get caught out being hungry and hangry and perhaps not enjoying your trip so much. My fifth and final tip is to make sure that you carry small denominations of Samoan tala on you at all times. We found that when we were traveling around, we would often come across amazing places that we wanted to go and have a look, or just amazing beaches or scenery. This is the case often. When you arrive at these places, a local from the village will come up and ask for a tip or a donation or some sort of payment. But often it's reasonable and enough that you want to go check it out anyway. But if you don't have small denominations on you, it makes it quite difficult for you to pay for this because they don't carry change on them. It's not a biggie, but if you were there and it was something you were really interested in and you had to miss out because you didn't carry any money on you, that would be quite disappointing. So to avoid that happening, just make sure you carry some small denominations on you at all times. I know I said I'd only do 5 tips, but I'm going to throw in a bonus tip as well, because I think this one is really important and it's personally something I really want to share with you guys. So, lucky you, here's my 6th tip for traveling Samoa. You're flying into Apia, which is the capital of Samoa and where the international airport is. If you're staying a couple of nights in Apia, or maybe more, I highly recommend doing the cultural experience that runs out of the information centre there on the waterfront. This cultural experience is free. You can go in and you can book for free, book a time slot. It runs for about 3 to 4 hours, and what you get is invaluable, especially if you're really wanting to engage with Samoan culture. During this cultural experience, the locals take you around how they do their traditional tattooing, how they cook and prepare their meals, how they make their traditional Tupperware, with also performances of dance and haka. I did this experience with my partner when we first arrived in Samoa, and it was invaluable for later in our travels around the country. We were able to understand Samoan culture. We were able to engage with the locals around cooking and the traditional Samoan tattoo, and I could not recommend this experience enough. So if you have a couple of nights in Apia, make sure you head down to the waterfront, go into the information centre and book one of these cultural experiences for free, and please donate, because they really go out of their way to make the experience authentic and special to each individual person, and they don't expect any payment. That brings us to the end of the video. Those were my top tips on traveling Samoa. I hope you guys got some value out of the video. If you did, give it a like. And if you want to keep up to date with my shenanigans, my vlogs, and my top tips, hit subscribe. I'm going to chuck up a link now. I'm not sure on which side. That'll take you to my Samoan vlog series. You can check out those videos and find out all the awesome stuff that my partner Ashley and I did when we were there for 2 weeks in October last year. Alright, we'll see you next time on Maddie's Shenanigans. Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for watching.